Allowed my wife and her entire family to splurge on my dime when I was earning good, but now that wife is earning better and my business is down, she's refusing to lend the same hand and threatening for divorce. So I do this one thing to save myself and now she's calling me selfish. BC Her entire family including her are getting notices from the court for this one reason. I, 38 male, have been married to my wife Sarah, 36 female, for 12 years now. We met in college and hit it off immediately. I was doing well in life, or at least that's what I thought. I started my own business in my late 20s, a small tech firm that catered to local businesses. It wasn't easy, but I poured my heart and soul into it, working long hours, sacrificing weekends, and putting all my earnings back into the business to make it grow. After a few years of struggle, things finally took off and I was making a comfortable income, enough to afford a nice house in the suburbs and provide a good life for my wife Sarah and our future family. Sarah and I had been married for 5 years when my business hit its peak. On the other hand, Sarah struggled to find a stable job in her field of environmental science. She was a teacher at the time earning a decent salary, and I didn't mean this as a brag, but I was bringing more to the home. She decided to quit her job when we started talking about having kids, and I fully supported that decision. After all, my business was thriving and I wanted my wife to be comfortable and stress-free while we planned our family. But things didn't go as planned. We faced some fertility issues, and after a couple of years of trying, we decided to take a break from the baby talk. I felt like that news had a lot of impact on her, because of which she got heavily involved in social activities. Very soon though, the social activities turned into something else. She began hosting lavish parties for her friends and family, and I never once complained because I believed she deserved it. Her family, however, was a different story. There's no easy way to say this, but Sarah's parents and siblings were not well off. Her parents were retired, living on a small pension, and her brother Tom was always in and out of jobs, struggling to find something stable. Naturally, Sarah felt obligated to help them out, and I didn't mind at first. It started small, helping her younger sister with college tuition or covering her parents' medical bills when they were short on cash. Then we covered their bills when they were short, paid for their vacations, and even foot the bill for Tom's multiple failed business ventures. I was happy to help because I thought we were a team and what was mine was hers. As time went on, the requests became more frequent and more substantial. Sarah's older brother needed help with a down payment on a house. Her cousin was struggling with debt and needed a bailout. Her parents wanted to renovate their home. Each time, Sarah would come to me with pleading eyes and I'd cave in. I loved her. I wanted her to be happy. Plus, I was making good money. So I figured, why not help out? This pattern continued for years. Sarah's family began to see me as their personal ATM. Expensive gifts for birthdays and holidays became the norm. Lavish family vacations that I funded were an annual occurrence. I even paid for Sarah's sister's entire wedding. All the while, Sarah encouraged this behavior, almost insisting that family helps the family. However, about 4 years ago, things started to change. Sarah finally landed a great job at an environmental consulting firm. Her salary was also pretty good, and I could not have been prouder of her. I was thrilled, and she was finally finding success in her chosen field. And it seemed like all the hard work and sacrifices were paying off. She was excited too, talking about all the ways she could contribute to our household, maybe even help my business expand. We were both on cloud nine, thinking that this was the start of a new chapter in our lives. At first, things were great. Sarah's job meant she could afford to treat herself more, and she did. New clothes, weekend getaways, and even a few big-ticket items like a brand new car. I was happy for her. She had supported me when I was building my business, and now it was her turn to enjoy the fruits of her labor. I didn't mind the extra spending because we were still in a good place financially, and I was confident that my business would continue to thrive. But I didn't see the harm in any of this until my business started to take a hit. A few big clients pulled out and the market shifted. Suddenly, my income plummeted. The market changed, competition grew fierce, and my once thriving tech firm started to bleed money. I had to make some tough decisions, including laying off some of my employees, scaling back our services, and even dipping into our savings to keep the business afloat. It was a tough time, but I believed I could turn it around, and I figured in worst-case scenarios, would be okay with Sarah's new income to help cushion the blow. That's when I noticed a shift in Sarah's attitude. When I suggested we cut back on some of the extravagant spending on her family, she became defensive. She argued that her family had come to expect a certain level of support from us and we couldn't just cut them off. I pointed out that we weren't in the same financial position anymore, but she dismissed my concerns. As my business continued to struggle, I started dipping into our savings to keep up with the demands of Sarah's family. I tried to talk to her about this multiple times, but she always brushed me off, saying things like, "It's just a rough patch. You'll bounce back," or "We can't let my family down now." The breaking point came about 6 months ago. It was during one of those ordinary weekends when everything seemed to be going relatively smoothly, or at least as smooth as things could be, given the circumstances. My business was still in a tough state, with every day feeling like a fight to stay afloat. I had spent countless hours trying to find ways to cut costs, renegotiate contracts, and salvage what was left of my once thriving company. The pressure was relentless, and the constant stress had become a permanent weight on my shoulders. In the midst of all this, Sarah's parents dropped a bombshell. They had found the perfect vacation home, a picturesque property in a highly sought-after location. It was everything they had ever dreamed of, and they were eager to make an offer before someone else snatched it up. But there was one problem. They didn't have enough for the down payment, so they turned to us, or rather they turned to me, with the expectation that I would provide the nearly $100,000 they needed. When I heard the amount, I was floored. I tried to understand the audacity of the request, because they knew what had happened to my business and how our savings were already dangerously low, depleted from months of trying to keep my business alive. Every dollar was precious, and the idea of parting with such a large sum for something as frivolous as a vacation home seemed absurd. It was money we simply didn't have to spare. I tried to be as kind as possible and somehow told them that we would have considered this at some other time, but it wasn't possible right now because of our situation. I expected that Sarah would support me, but instead, she was just glaring at me. My father-in-law, who clearly hadn't expected this response, said that they'd pay me back eventually and this was just a loan. I made it clear that it wasn't about getting paid back, but our financial condition, and we cannot afford to contribute such a huge amount of money right now. That topic ended with that awkward talk, but when I finally brought up this subject with Sarah, I was met with a reaction that left me reeling. Instead of understanding or even a hint of concern, she exploded. It was as if a dam had burst, and she started accusing me of being selfish, of not caring about her family, and of abandoning the very people who had been there for us in the past. The words stung, but what hurt more was the realization that she couldn't see how dire our situation had become. Sarah brought up all the times I had helped her family in the past, painting a picture of generosity and support that she claimed I was now withholding out of spite. It was as if she had forgotten all the sacrifices I had made, all the late nights and early mornings spent working to provide for us, for her and her family. She seemed to believe that my refusal to hand over the money was a personal attack rather than a necessary decision based on our circumstances. I tried to make her understand the same thing I had said to her parents, but she dismissed my concerns with a wave of her hand, scoffing at the idea that I was anything other than jealous of her success. The accusation cut deep. How had things come to this? How had the woman I once adored turned into someone who saw my struggles as a weakness rather than a shared burden? As the argument escalated, Sarah's anger only grew. She accused me of being stingy, of changing the rules now that the tables had turned, and of trying to control her through money. Her words were harsh, but the final blow came when she threatened divorce. She claimed she had been unhappy for a while and that my sudden stinginess was the last straw. It felt like a knife to the heart, a betrayal that I hadn't seen coming. I was stunned. How had things gotten to this point? When had we gone from being a team to being competitors? The woman I had once trusted with everything was now threatening to tear our lives apart because I couldn't or wouldn't sacrifice what little we had left for a vacation home her parents wanted. In that moment, I realized that the woman I had married was no longer the person standing in front of me. The love and partnership we had once shared had been replaced by something toxic, something I could no longer recognize. It was a painful awakening, one that left me questioning everything I thought I knew about our marriage. That night, as Sarah slept, I went through our financial records. What I found shocked me. Over the past decade, I have given over $500,000 to Sarah's family in various forms of help. That didn't even include the lavish gifts and vacations. It was money we could really use now that my business was struggling. I spent the next few days, in a daze, trying to figure out what to do. I loved Sarah, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being taken advantage of. Her threat of divorce over money for her parents' vacation home kept ringing in my ears. After much consideration, I made a decision that would change everything. I contacted a lawyer and filed for divorce myself. But that wasn't all. On the lawyer's advice, I also filed a lawsuit against Sarah's family members for unjust enrichment. The lawsuit claimed that the money given to her family over the years were not gifts, but loans that were now due. It was a long shot, but my lawyer believed we had a case, given the pattern of behavior and the sheer amount of money involved. When Sarah found out, she was livid. She couldn't believe I would do this to her and her family. She called me every name in the book and said I was ruining their lives. Her family was in a panic, with some of them receiving court notices about the lawsuit. Now Sarah is telling everyone who will listen that I'm a selfish monster who's trying to bankrupt her family out of spite. She says I'm punishing them for my own business failures. Her siblings have been blowing up my phone with angry messages, and her parents are devastated. Part of me feels terrible about this. These people were my family for over a decade. But another part of me feels this is the only way to recoup some of the money that was taken advantage of over the years. So, Reddit, Ida for filing this lawsuit and potentially financially ruining my soon-to-be ex-wife's family. Update 1. Wow. I didn't expect this post to blow up like it did. Thank you all for your comments and insights. I've read through as many as I could, and I wanted to provide an update on the situation. First, to address some common questions. Yes, I have documentation for most of the gifts given to Sarah's family over the years. I kept meticulous records for tax purposes, which have now become invaluable. It's almost eerie how these records have transformed from mundane bookkeeping to the backbone of a legal battle. Every transfer, every extravagant gift, every payment for one of their whims is logged in detail. Down to the date and purpose. It's unsettling to see in black and white just how much of my hard-earned money went towards fulfilling the endless desires of her family. No, there were never any explicit agreements that these were loans. However, my lawyer believes the pattern and scale of the giving combined with the current circumstances make for a strong case of unjust enrichment. Essentially, the argument is that Sarah's family benefited financially from my generosity to a degree that is both unreasonable and unjust, especially considering the position I'm in now. It's not just about the money though, that's a huge part of it, but about the principle that they should not be allowed to profit off of my financial ruin. Sarah and I do not have children, which simplifies the divorce proceeding somewhat. In one sense, it's a relief that we don't have the additional layer of complexity that children would bring to the situation. But on the other hand, it also makes me confront the reality that everything we built together, everything I thought we were building towards, wasn't enough to keep us from this point. It's a sobering thought and it leaves me questioning whether the life we had was ever as solid as I believed it to be. Now for the update. The day after I posted, Sarah moved out of our house and in with her parents. I wasn't entirely surprised. After all, her parents' home has always been her sanctuary, the place where she runs when things don't go her way. But seeing her empty closet and the void she left behind was a jarring reminder that our marriage was truly over. She's still furious and is telling anyone who will listen that I'm a vindictive, greedy person who's trying to destroy her family. It stings to know she's painting me as the villain when all I ever did was try to support her and her family. But I suppose, in her eyes, refusing to continue financing their lifestyle is a betrayal of the highest order. I've received some concerning messages from her brothers, veiled threats about making me pay for what I'm doing. They've always been protective of their sister, but this feels different, darker, more personal. It's as if they can't comprehend that I'm simply trying to protect what's left of my life and my financial future. I've documented these and passed them along to my lawyer who advised me to consider a restraining order if things escalate. It's surreal to think that this is where we are now. Threats and legal actions between people who were once family. On the legal front, things are moving quickly. My divorce attorney is working in tandem with the lawyer handling the unjust enrichment case. They've advised me that this will likely be a long, drawn-out process, but they're optimistic about our chances. It's a strange feeling, preparing for a legal battle against the very people I once considered my own. The optimism of my lawyers is a small comfort, but the reality of the situation weighs heavily on me. This isn't just a fight for money, it's a fight for my dignity, for my future and for the belief that I deserve better than what I've been put through. One interesting development, Sarah's younger sister, the one whose college tuition I helped pay, reached out to me privately. She expressed that she felt uncomfortable with how our family had treated me over the years and offered to testify on my behalf if it came to that. I'm touched by her honesty, but I'm also cautious about involving her and potentially damaging her relationship with her family. It's a complicated situation. On one hand, her testimony could be incredibly valuable, but on the other, I don't want to be the cause of further rifts in a family that's already on the brink of fracturing. It's a delicate balance and I'm not sure yet what the right move is. As for my emotional state, I'm still a mess. The reality of the divorce is sinking in and despite everything, there's a part of me that misses Sarah. We built a life together for 12 years, and it's hard to let that go. I'm also working on my business at the same time because that also requires my attention. I really wish that it didn't come to this, and I had Sarah by my side. Many times, I feel like I should just let it go. But every time I start to waver, I remind myself of how she threatened me with divorce over her parents' vacation home, and my resolve strengthens. It's a reminder that the woman I'm missing is not the same woman who stood before me that day demanding that I bankrupt myself for the sake of her family's latest indulgence. It's a painful realization, but it's what keeps me moving forward one step at a time. I'll keep you all updated as things progress. Again, thank you for your support and advice. It means more than you know during this difficult time. Update 2. I'm still in shock as I write this update. Past 24 hours have been an absolute whirlwind and I'm struggling to process everything that's happened. It feels like I've been living in some kind of strange surreal nightmare that I can't wake up from and the gravity of the situation keeps pulling me deeper into it. Yesterday morning, I I received a frantic call from Sarah. Her voice was shaky, filled with panic and desperation, and for a moment I didn't even recognize her. It was as if all the anger and resentment that had been boiling between us dissolved in that instant. She was crying, barely coherent as she tried to explain what was happening. I managed to catch that something had happened with her father, but beyond that, everything was a blur. When I arrived, the scene was utter chaos. Sarah's mother was sitting on the couch, her face buried in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. It took me a few minutes to piece together what had actually happened, but once I did, I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Apparently, the stress of the lawsuit and the looming threat of financial ruin had been too much for Sarah's father to handle. In a moment of sheer desperation, he had emptied their safe of all cash and valuables, cleared out their joint bank account and disappeared without a trace. He left behind a hastily written note scrawled with shaky handwriting saying that he couldn't face the shame and the potential poverty that awaited them. He was going away to fix things, though what that meant exactly was unclear to everyone. I was completely stunned. This was never my intention. Yes, I wanted justice, and yes, I wanted to recoup some of the financial losses that had bled me dry over the years, but I never intended for anyone to be pushed to such desperate measures. The image of Sarah's father, a man who I had once respected and admired, reduced to such a state of panic and fear was something I could barely wrap my head around. As the day unfolded, more details began to emerge, each one more shocking than the last. We discovered that Sarah's father had been hiding a gambling addiction for years, something none of us had ever suspected. The money I had been providing, the endless stream of help that I thought was going towards various family expenses, had actually been fueling his addiction. The thought of losing that financial lifeline, combined with the pressure of the lawsuit, had evidently pushed him over the edge. The police were called and a missing person report was filed. The house quickly filled with Sarah's siblings, all of them tense and on edge, as they tried to process the situation. For the first time in weeks, I found myself working alongside them rather than feeling like an outsider. We were all united in the same goal, finding Sarah's father and bringing him back safely. Amidst the chaos, Sarah pulled me aside. Her face was pale, her eyes red and puffy from hours of crying. She apologized for everything that happened, and frankly, it was the last thing I expected. She admitted that she had been blind to her family's faults, that she had taken advantage of my generosity for years and that her threat of divorce had been nothing but a manipulative attempt to get her way. She confessed that she had allowed her family's expectations to cloud her judgment, and now, seeing the fallout of those decisions, she was filled with regret. I was overwhelmed by her admission. Part of me wanted to forgive her on the spot and to tell her that everything would be okay, that we could get through this together. But another part of me, the part that had been hardened by years of financial and emotional manipulation, held back. I knew that this apology, sincere as it might be, didn't erase the damage that had been done. It didn't change the fact that Sarah had threatened to end our marriage over money for a vacation home or that she had been complicit in draining our finances to the breaking point. It was a complicated, tangled mess of emotions, and I wasn't sure how to navigate it. As night fell, there was still no sign of Sarah's father. All of us were visibly alarmed. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a grim determination to find him before it was too late. We scoured every possible place he might have gone, every contact he might have reached out to, but it was like searching for a needle in a haystack. His note gave us no real clues, just fake promises that he was going to fix things. What those things were or how he planned to fix them, we had no idea. In the midst of it all, I made a decision. I called my lawyer and instructed him to focus solely on the divorce proceedings for now. The lawsuit could wait. This wasn't the time for legal battles or court dates right now. The priority was finding Sarah's father and ensuring his safety. Everything else could be dealt with later. I'm writing this update from Sarah's parents' guest room. I've agreed to stay here for the time being to help with the search efforts and to support the family through this crisis. I don't know what this means for my relationship with Sarah or what the future holds for us. Everything feels uncertain, like we're all standing on the edge of a cliff waiting to see what happens. We're still looking for Sarah's father, and as much as I want to blame him for the mess we're in, all I really want right now is for him to be found safe. Despite everything, I just want him to be okay. I'll update again when I have more information. For now, if you're the praying type, please keep Sarah's father in your thoughts. Thank you. Update 3. It's been a few days since my last update and so much has changed. I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything that's happened, but I'll do my best to bring you all up to speed. First and foremost, Sarah's father has been found. The news came in the early hours of the morning when we received a call from the authorities. He was discovered 3 states away, holed up in a small rundown motel. When the police found him, he was physically unharmed. He looked lost, as if the weight of his own choices had finally come crashing down on him. The police brought him back home 2 days ago, and he's currently undergoing a psychiatric evaluation at a local hospital. The relief that washed over everyone when we got the news was palpable, but it was mixed with an overwhelming sadness at how things had spiraled out of control. The revelation of his gambling addiction has thrown the family into turmoil. Years of secrets and lies have come to light, and everyone is struggling to come to terms with the reality of the situation. Sarah's mother, who had always seemed so in control, is devastated. She had no idea about the extent of her husband's problem or the financial hole they were in. The woman who always prided herself on keeping the family together is now trying to hold on to what little remains of the life they once knew. As for the legal situation, things have taken a turn. After long, difficult discussions with Sarah and her siblings and with the guidance of my lawyer, I've decided to drop the lawsuit against the family. It wasn't an easy decision and it took me a lot of soul-searching to get there. But after seeing the sheer devastation this has caused, it no longer feels right to pursue it. Instead, we're working on a structured repayment plan for a portion of the money. Given the circumstances, it feels like the most humane and reasonable thing to do. It's not about the money anymore. It's about finding a way to move forward without causing further harm. Sarah and I have had several long emotional conversations over the past few days. We've both acknowledged our faults, my enabling behavior, her entitlement and manipulation. The conversations were raw and painful at times, but they were also necessary. For the first time in what feels like forever, we were honest with each other. And that honesty, as difficult as it was, has started to rebuild a foundation that had been missing from our relationship for years. To my surprise, Sarah suggested we put our divorce proceedings on hold. She asked if we could try marriage counseling to see if there was still something worth saving. I was hesitant at first. Part of me was ready to walk away, to start fresh and leave all this behind. But, after much thought, I agreed to give it a try. We had 12 years together and, despite everything, there's still love there. It won't be easy, and we both know that. But we also know that anything worth having is worth fighting for, and we're both willing to put in the work. As part of our agreement to work on things, we've set some ground rules. We're moving to a smaller, more affordable house. Our current place, with all its luxury and excess, has too many memories of past extravagances. It's time for a fresh start in a home that reflects the simpler, more intentional life we want to build together. We've also agreed to go to individual therapy as well as couples counseling. Sarah needs to work on her family boundary issues to understand why she felt compelled to prioritize them over our marriage. And I need to address my tendency to enable harmful behavior to understand why I kept giving even when I knew it was bad for us both. We've set strict limits on financial help to family members. No more bailing people out. No more loans that are never repaid. Any significant financial decisions will be made jointly with the advice of a financial planner. It's a way to protect ourselves, to ensure that we're both on the same page and that our future is secure. At the same time, my business is starting to get back on track. It's been a slow, difficult process, but there's hope on the horizon.